11:17 p.m. on a Tuesday in late September, the silence in the two-bedroom condo was the loudest thing Sterling had ever heard. It was a hollow, echoing void where a life used to be. He stood in the middle of the living room, a 37-year-old aircraft mechanic making $58,000 a year, and surveyed the wreckage. But there was no wreckage, not in the traditional sense. There was just absence. The $3,200 leather sofa was gone. The $1,500 LG OLED television that had been mounted on the wall was gone, leaving behind a stark white bracket and 4 ugly holes. The mahogany coffee table, the one Brielle had insisted on buying for $800 from Crate and Barrel, was gone. Every rug, every lamp, every picture frame had been meticulously removed. He walked into the kitchen. The $2,500 stainless steel refrigerator stood open and empty, its little interior light illuminating nothing. Even the ice trays were gone. The cupboards were bare, stripped of the wedding gift plates and the glasses they'd bought at Target. He pulled out his phone, a 3-year-old Samsung Galaxy S10 with a crack in the corner. He opened his banking app, his thumb hovering over the screen. He already knew what he would find, but the finality of seeing it was a separate, colder dread. Joint checking account, $0. Joint savings account, $0. His personal checking account, where his direct deposit from MacDill Air Force Base landed, was the last bastion. He tapped it. Available balance, $213.47. She had left him with $213.47 to his name. Brielle, his wife of 6 years, had executed a flawless, systematic dismantling of their shared existence. The note she'd left on the barren kitchen counter was brief, written on a crisp sheet of $10 stationery in her perfect, looping cursive. Sterling, I've taken what's mine. The car is paid off, and in my name. The accounts are closed. I've moved on to a life I deserve. Don't contact me. There was no negotiation, no tearful goodbye, just a corporate-style liquidation. He sank to the floor, the cool linoleum a shock against his skin. He was a man who fixed the engines of C-130 cargo planes, a master of complex machinery and high-stakes diagnostics. He understood torque and pressure and catastrophic failure. But this was a different kind of system failure, one he had no tools to repair. He had his wallet, the clothes on his back, and a condo lease with his name on it that cost $2,200 a month. He had no furniture, no food, and $200. He had no idea that a crumpled piece of paper in his wallet, a forgotten $2 purchase from a Circle K, was about to become the most powerful tool in the world. But that moment was still 6 weeks away, an eternity from the hollowed-out silence of his empty life. Do you believe that sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the first day of your real one? Let us know in the comments what you think Sterling should do next. Their life together had been a carefully curated performance, directed by Brielle. Sterling, a steady and unassuming black man with neat, shoulder-length locks he kept tied back at work, had always been the stagehand. Brielle was the star. Her skin was a luminous, deep brown that she meticulously cared for with a regimen of products that cost upwards of $300 a month. She worked in marketing for a downtown real estate firm, a job that paid her $75,000 a year but gave her a taste for a lifestyle that cost 10 times that. She moved through the world with a sense of entitlement that Sterling had once mistaken for confidence. Their condo on Oakmont Drive was her showroom. "We need a statement piece," she'd declared one Saturday, pointing to a gaudy, gold-legged armchair in a furniture boutique in Hyde Park Village. The price tag read $1,850. "Bree, we can't afford that," Sterling had said, his voice low. He was thinking of the $150 he'd just spent on a new pair of Red Wing steel-toed boots for work, a purchase he'd agonized over for a month. Brielle had sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation. It's not about affording it, Sterling. It's about investing in our image. It's what people see. Nobody sees your greasy boots. She'd bought the chair on her credit card, another brick in the wall of debt she was building around them. The contrast was everywhere. Her closet was a temple to aspirational wealth, filled with $400 Michael Kors handbags, a $2,400 Burberry trench coat she'd worn twice, and a collection of shoes that was worth more than his 2012 Toyota Camry. His own closet was sparse, worn Carhartt jackets, neatly folded t-shirts, and the uniforms he wore on the base. He found satisfaction in his work, in the tangible reality of keeping billion-dollar aircraft flying. He loved the smell of jet fuel and the camaraderie of the hangar. The shared purpose with the other mechanics. Brielle hated it. "You come home smelling like a garage," she'd complain, wrinkling her nose as he walked in. "Can't you just get a desk job? Something clean?" "This is who I am, Brie. I'm good at it," he'd say, trying to keep the hurt out of his voice. "Being good at getting your hands dirty doesn't get us into the Palma Seca Golf and Country Club," she'd retort, not looking up from her iPad, where she was scrolling through listings for multi-million-dollar homes in South Tampa. $58,000 a year doesn't buy a life, Sterling. It buys a cage. He tried. He really did. He took on extra shifts, pulling weekend duty to patch up the financial hole she created. He learned to cook her favorite meals, trying to create moments of domestic peace. He'd spend hours in the kitchen preparing braised short ribs, a recipe he found online, hoping the smell would welcome her home and soften her edges. Sometimes it worked. She'd kiss his cheek, call him her amazing chef, and for an evening, they would feel like a real couple. They'd sit on the $3,200 sofa and watch a movie on the $1,500 TV, and he'd let himself believe this was enough. But the peace never lasted. It was always punctured by a credit card bill, a passive-aggressive comment, or a dismissive laugh. One evening, his mother called. She was a warm, kind woman who lived in a modest but immaculate home in Brandon. She was a retired nurse, a pillar of her local church community. "Your cousin Jamal is getting married," she'd said, her voice full of joy. "The whole family is so excited." Sterling felt a surge of warmth. "That's great, Mama. Tell him I said congratulations." After he hung up, Brielle looked at him from across the room, her expression unreadable. "Brandon," she said, the word tasting like an insult. "Are we going to have to go to some potluck in a church basement?" "It's family, Brielle." "It's not the kind of family that helps us get ahead," she'd replied, turning her attention back to her phone. He had no idea she was already planning her exit, already consulting with a divorce attorney, already seeing someone else, a developer who owned a fleet of European cars and a penthouse overlooking the bay. She was building her new life, while still living in the old one. And he was just a piece of furniture she hadn't gotten around to moving out yet. The unraveling began with 1,000 tiny cuts. Cruelty became Brielle's primary language. It started with casual dismissals and escalated into surgical strikes on his self-worth. One Thursday night, Sterling came home late, his body aching from a 12-hour shift, troubleshooting a persistent hydraulic leak on a KC-135 Stratotanker. He was proud. He'd found the faulty valve that 3 other mechanics had missed. He walked in, his hands still stained with grease, despite scrubbing them raw. Brielle was dressed for a night out, wearing a sleek black dress that probably cost more than his weekly paycheck. A $6,000 Chanel bag was perched on the kitchen island. She was sipping a glass of white wine. "You're finally home," she said, her tone flat. "I was about to leave without you." "Leave? Where are we going? He asked, confused. She let out a short, bitter laugh. Not we, Sterling. I have a networking event at the Tampa Museum of Art. You know, with people who matter. I told you about it last week. He didn't remember. His mind was a catalog of engine specs and maintenance schedules. I'm sorry, I forgot. I was slammed at work. Of course you were, she said, looking him up and down with open disdain. Look at you. You can't go anywhere looking like that anyway. You'd embarrass me. She took another sip of wine. Just order a pizza or something. Use the emergency cash in the drawer. The emergency cash was a $50 bill he'd put there for a power outage. The implication was clear. His presence was its own kind of minor disaster. The arguments grew more frequent, more pointed. She stopped hiding her contempt. One Saturday he was trying to balance their budget. A stack of bills and receipts spread across the dining table he'd bought for $400 from a second-hand store. This is unsustainable, Brielle, he said, his voice strained. Your credit card payment was $2,800 last month. That's almost my entire take-home pay. She walked over, looked at his spreadsheet, and scoffed. You're tracking a $6 coffee from Starbucks? How pathetic. This is the problem, Sterling. You think small. You will always think small. You're a $58,000 man in $1 million world. This is our world, he shot back, his frustration finally boiling over. This is the money we actually have. No, she said, her voice dropping to a cold, quiet whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. This is the money you have. I'm destined for more. I won't be anchored to your mediocrity. That was the moment he knew it was over. The word anchored hit him like a physical blow. She saw him as a weight, a thing holding her down. The final day was surreal in its efficiency. It was a Tuesday. He came home from the base at 5:30 p.m. to find a U-Haul truck, a small one, a 10-foot box truck that cost $19.95 plus mileage, parked in their designated spot. Brielle was directing two of her friends, women Sterling had never liked, as they carried boxes out of the condo. She wasn't crying. Her face was set in a mask of grim determination. Brielle, what is this? He asked, his heart beginning to pound a heavy, panicked rhythm against his ribs. She didn't look at him. She pointed to the sofa her friends were struggling with. Careful with the corners. I don't want it scratched. She finally turned to Sterling, her eyes as cold and hard as polished stones. I'm leaving, Sterling. It's over. Over? Just like that? You're just taking everything? I'm taking what my salary paid for, she said, a cruel twist to her lips. It was a lie. His salary had paid the rent, the utilities, the groceries. Her salary had paid for the depreciating assets she was now hauling away. The sofa, the TV, the dining set, all of it. I have the receipts. He stood there, paralyzed, as they stripped the place bare. They took the pots and pans. They took the towels from the bathroom. They even took the half-empty bottle of $12 dish soap from under the sink. It was a calculated act of humiliation, designed to leave him with absolutely nothing. The last thing to go was the television. As one of her friends disconnected the cables, Brielle walked over to him. I've already been to the bank, she said, her voice low and confidential, as if sharing a secret. I cleared out the joint accounts. It's about $87,000. Consider it my severance package. He could only stare at her. The woman he had married, the woman he had loved, was a stranger. A ruthless, efficient stranger. You're leaving me with nothing, he whispered, the words catching in his throat. She almost smiled. Not nothing, she said, and her tone was the final, deepest cut. I'm leaving you with the rent payment. It's due on the 1st. She turned and walked away, climbing into the passenger seat of the U-Haul without a backward glance. He watched the truck pull out of the complex, its taillights disappearing into the Tampa traffic. He was left in the echoing silence, with the note on the counter and $213 in his bank account. The underestimation was complete. She had reduced him to a balance on a screen, a problem to be discarded. She had no idea she had just made the biggest financial miscalculation of her life. The 6 weeks that followed were a masterclass in quiet desperation. The first night Sterling slept on the floor, using his work jacket as a pillow. The cool, hard floorboards seemed to leach the warmth from his body. At 2 a.m., he woke up shivering, the profound emptiness of the condo a physical presence. The next morning at 6:47 a.m., he drove his 2012 Toyota Camry with its 187,000 miles and a persistent rattle in the exhaust, not to MacDill, but to his mother's house in Brandon. The drive felt like a pilgrimage of shame. He passed the gleaming glass towers of downtown Tampa, symbols of a world he no longer had any claim to. He passed the Starbucks on Lexington, where he and Brielle used to get coffee, a $14 weekend ritual that now seemed like an impossible luxury. When he arrived at his mother's modest single-story home, with its perfectly manicured garden of hibiscus and gardenias, he felt like a failure. His mother, a wise and gentle black woman named Clara, opened the door before he even knocked. She took one look at his face, her warm brown eyes full of a deep, knowing sorrow. She didn't ask questions. She simply pulled him into a hug, her arms a haven of unconditional love. "The spare room is ready for you, baby," she whispered into his hair. The spare room was small, filled with boxes of old family photos and his late father's books. The bed was a twin, the mattress soft and worn. But it was clean, and it was safe. That night, lying in the narrow bed, he could hear the gentle hum of his mother's television in the living room. It was the sound of security, a sound he hadn't realized he'd been missing for years. Life became a series of small, grinding humiliations. The condo lease was an anchor around his neck. He called the property manager, explained the situation, and paid a $4,400 penalty to break the lease, draining his meager savings and requiring a painful $4,000 loan from his mother. He sold his father's old Omega Seamaster watch, a treasured keepsake, to a pawn shop for $350, just to have cash for gas and food. He put most of his belongings, the few clothes Brielle had left, his tools, his military service awards, into a 5x5 storage unit that cost $68 a month. His commute to MacDill became a 2-hour ordeal. To save gas, he would drive his Camry to the Heartline bus station and take the Route 36 bus the rest of the way. He'd sit among the other working-class people of Tampa, his head down, the shame a hot coal in his stomach. He, a highly skilled mechanic trusted with multi-million-dollar military assets, was counting out quarters for bus fare. He ate his lunch, a peanut butter sandwich, and an apple packed by his mother, in the break room, avoiding the invitations from his work buddies to go out for lunch. He couldn't afford the $15 for a burger and fries. He didn't contact Brielle. His pride wouldn't let him. More than that, he knew it would be useless. She had made her decision. Any contact would only be an invitation for more cruelty. He just put his head down and worked, his focus on the intricate machinery of the aircraft, a welcome escape from the shambles of his life. The logic of hydraulics and the precision of turbine engines were a comfort. They made sense. They followed rules. It was during the third week of this bleak new reality, on a Wednesday afternoon, that he made the fateful purchase. He had stopped at a Circle K on Dale Mabry Highway to put $10 of gas in his car. As he was paying the cashier, he saw the Powerball sign. The jackpot was an astronomical figure, something like $750 million. On a whim, a tiny, hopeless act of defiance against the crushing weight of his circumstances, he slid $2 more across the counter. "One Powerball ticket, please," he said. "Quick pick." The cashier handed him the small slip of paper. He glanced at the numbers 04, 08, 15, 16, 23, 42, and thought nothing of them. It was a fantasy, a $2 dream. He tucked the ticket into the back pocket of his wallet, behind his military ID and his expired credit cards, and promptly forgot all about it. That week, Brielle's lawyer sent him the official divorce papers. He signed them at his mother's dining room table, using a cheap 50-cent Bic pen, and sent them back without a single amendment. He agreed to everything. He just wanted it to be over. He was surrendering. Or so he thought. He had no idea he was actually holding the declaration of his own independence. A folded piece of paper worth more than every skyscraper in Tampa combined. The suffering was immense. He lost 20 pounds. Dark circles formed under his eyes. He felt invisible, erased. At work, he was a ghost, performing his duties with a quiet, hollowed-out efficiency. His supervisor, a grizzled master sergeant named Wallace, pulled him aside one day. "Sterling, you doing okay, son? You're not yourself?" "I'm fine, Sarge. Just some stuff at home," Sterling mumbled. "If you need to talk, my door is always open. The Air Force has resources, you know, chaplains, counselors." "I appreciate it, Sarge. I'll be all right." But he wasn't sure he would be. The future was a gray, featureless wall. Every dollar was accounted for, every expenditure a source of anxiety. He was drowning, and the shore was nowhere in sight. The world had shrunk to the size of his mother's spare room, the rumbling interior of the city bus, and the loud, greasy hangar at MacDill. This was his cage now,